Well, welcome everybody. It's a delight to welcome you all here on what is finally a almost sunny day. So welcome to our Brown Bag Lunch program. My name is Tova Brandt. I'm the executive director here, and it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, a previous executive director who is a familiar face to most of you, John Mark Nielsen. I do want to give a thanks to our series sponsor, Dennis Anderson, a former board member and Elkhorn native, is the sponsor of this year's Brown Bag Lunch program, and we want to thank him for making this possible. Without further ado, I turn this over to John Mark Nielsen discussing the Danish Pioneer.
Thank you, Tova. Thank you very much, and I want to acknowledge Cheyenne as well, because Cheyenne Yan's daughter is going to be helping me out. I told her yesterday that I wanted to be free to move around and to use the screen, not unlike a weatherman, who, when you're watching the weather, talks about fronts moving in and that sort of thing. I'm also going to put you to work today. That's something as a attendant at a presentation that I don't like, but I want to do something just a little bit different than maybe has been the case in the past, and get some audience involvement. That's why I was trying to appeal to people to come up front, because it's going to be a little hard to see the screen, and you'll see why in just a moment. So we're talking about today the Danske Pioneer, the Danish Pioneer. It was founded 150 years ago this year. A man by the name of Mark Hansen walked into the offices of the telegraph company that was owned by John and Edward Creighton. And Mark wanted he wanted money. I can relate to that because I've done that too. He wanted money. He wanted money to begin a newspaper. And that newspaper had a purpose, because a year before in Omaha, a number of Scandinavians, particularly Danes, had gotten together and created a newspaper called the Nebraska Scandinavia. The Nebraska Scandinavian. And it was a Republican newspaper, representing the Republican Party. And Mark Hansen was a Democrat, and felt that there needed to be a newspaper representing that perspective. And so he appealed to Edward Creighton in particular. Any of you familiar with Omaha know that Creighton University is named after Edward and John Creighton, who on Edward's death actually had bequeathed funds to create the university. At any rate, Edward Creighton responded favorably. Mark Hansen started the paper, and within a year he had bought out the Nebraska Scandinavian. So that started what became a very important newspaper, and a newspaper that we're going to be celebrating today and throughout the year. Next week, for example, the Raybould National Park Society is meeting in Omaha, or in Chicago, and we'll be talking about the Pioneer there, because of course since 1958, the Danish Pioneer has been published in Chicago, and so there is a anticipation of celebrating throughout the year. Well, Mark Hansen himself was a rather interesting character and an entrepreneur. He was from just in a village southwest of Kolding, Denmark, on the Jutland Peninsula, and he had, growing up, as a young man, had fought with the Danish ducal forces, the forces of Schleswig, in the early war between Prussia and the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein in 1849, 1850. So he was a veteran of the Schleswig, the Danish Schleswig forces. Following that, he emigrated from Denmark, immigrated to the United States. He had converted to Mormonism. He was a part of that major conversion that occurred in the late 1840s and 1850s in Denmark, leading to, and many people are not aware of this, but leading to many, many Danes migrating from Denmark to Utah. And he was part of that band, and yet as he got closer, he recognized that as a Dane, he was not going to be able to rise in the leadership of this church that had been founded in America. And so he had second thoughts, left the Mormon church, and decided to settle down in Omaha, and opened up a store there. Well, then the Civil War came along, and he joined the Nebraska Cavalry and served in the American Civil War, particularly Mississippi and Louisiana. So he had had some experiences before the year of 1872 when he approached Edward Creighton and John Creighton for the funds to open up this newspaper. So he was immediately successful, but before we leave him, and so that I am sure that I mention this, he will sell the newspaper, as we'll see in just a bit. However, he did go on to find the Danish Brotherhood in America as well in 1882. So here we have an individual who was very active in trying to preserve and to communicate with and to celebrate the Danish presence in the United States. That makes Mark Hansen a kind of interesting individual. Well, the Danske Pioneer, the Danish Pioneer, very quickly became the most important newspaper in the United States, the most important Danish American newspaper in the United States. By 1914, it had a circulation of almost 40,000 subscribers, with a readership approaching over 100,000 by the time you circulate newspapers, by the time families get newspapers. They at that time speculated that that over 100,000 readers were regular reading the Danske Pioneer, which was published each week, and so it reached out to a significant population. It is significant when you think that in about 1925, the population of Danish immigration to the United States was about 325, between 325 and 350,000 people. So the Danske Pioneer was read by fully a third of that population, and we're not even talking about the children. So it was a significant population or publication to a population. I think the best way, and as I promised you, I wanted to get you involved, is to look at the newspaper itself. It was founded 150 years ago. It is still published today, and to see some of the changes that have occurred. And as we look at that, then, I think we can maybe discover, maybe observe some important issues related to the Danish American population. So I have selected two issues from the Danske Pioneer, which I want to say, by the way, is available on the museum's website and the Danish American Archive and Library's website. Why is it available? Because we were able to get a grant from the AP Møllerfondet in Denmark to digitize and to collect all these, and because of the museum, we've been able to make these available. So they are available, and Cheyenne is going to take us to where and how, because you just go to explore on the website, and down here on in the very left-hand corner is the newspaper library. And so now Cheyenne is going to take us through to an issue that was published in 1914. So let's go there.
And this is what it looks like. There are also other newspapers available.
Yes. That's and while you're finding the next one that I'm going to use, I want to say one of the newspapers there is Danske. Danske was, Danavirka. Danavirka was founded here in Elkhorn in 1880, and it was founded in response to the Danish Pioneer. H.O. Kirkeberg and Christian Østergaard, two of the teachers at the folk high school here in Elkhorn, had trouble with Mark Hansen and were frustrated that he was not more supportive of the folk high school movement than he was. And so they decided, as with Mark Hansen getting frustrated over the Republicans in the Nebraska Scandinavian, they decided, well, if we're frustrated with their newspaper, we're going to start our own newspaper. And so in 1880, they started Danavirka, and Danavirka was published here in Elkhorn for 2 years before it was bought by the Holst family and moved to Cedar Falls, Iowa, where it was published until 1952. So it's part of a whole evolving media or newspaper story, and some of those newspapers, as I say, and as Cheyenne pointed out, are available on the website. Well, we're going to the Danske Pioneer, and specifically an issue published on July 9th, I think it is. Is that what I said? July 9th, 1914. Now, I picked this out for a reason, just simply because it does illustrate some items, some issues well. What do you note about this front page?
No pictures.
There are no pictures. Exactly. I mean, there's no pictures. Nothing leaps out at you. Another issue you might notice.
No headlines.
No headlines. No large headlines. Dawn and I get the World Herald, and there were large headlines across the front page yesterday and today. But there's no large headlines. Anything else? There's a lot of print on this, and folks, I mean, this newspaper was, I have the dimensions, something, it's like 40 inches by 50 inches, so the page was large. You have 8 columns. There are a lot of words. Let's try and make it a little larger with the masthead for starters, just for the fun of it. So we have this masthead. What do you notice about the masthead?
Danish flag.
There's the Danish flag.
Is that an American?
And that's an American flag. As I was pointing to Dawn out, typically when you have the flags displayed, the American flag is on the right hand of the speaker, and the flag of another nation is on the left hand. So this is switched around, at least in terms of flag etiquette. Anything else that you can, maybe we can just kind of make a little bit larger since we've noticed that. Thank you.
It looks like a rural area on the right and maybe a more mountainous to the left.
Yeah, yes. In fact, if you were able to study this, farms, and there's a windmill out there, and there's a plowed field. Oh, there's even a plow here. And look who's standing here. Undoubtedly a Danish pioneer, okay? And then we look out to the west, and we have a Native American, and we have buffalo, and we have mountains. It's speaking to an audience in 1872. Of course, this is 1914, but when the masthead was created in the late 1870s, it spoke to a number of issues. The fact that they were pioneers. They were coming out to the West, and that they were changing the landscape by farms and homesteading and that out of that Wild West that had existed. Good. I'm glad you saw that. there in the middle is the eagle, the American eagle, and E pluribus unum. E pluribus unum is what? It is, and it is the motto of this country. Out of many, one. And so it's speaking to, I think, those who are here in this country, as well as, because the Danish Pioneer was also sent back to Denmark, it was speaking to those who might be interested in becoming a part of this dramatic story. All right, so it's entered as mail matter of the second class at the post office of Omaha, Nebraska on Thursday, July 9th, 1914. Can we make it a little smaller, or let's go to this side of it. Yes, now it's the 42nd year, and over here we have inland. Some of you know what that means. It means, of course, that's the national news. And if you can pull it over here, to this direction, there we have Udland, the international news. Now, you see, this would have merited a large headline, but up here is double murdet i Sarajevo. Double murdet i Sarajevo. The double murder in Sarajevo. So this is July 9th, 1914. In June, end of June, Archduke Ferdinand and his wife had been assassinated in Sarajevo. This is communicating that news to the immigrant population. And the story then goes on to explain what happened. Now, let's see if we can make it even a little larger, so large that they can see the little print. So, something else you're going to notice, if you can see this, do you see the script? It's not Roman letters, it's Gothic script, and that was the traditional script or typography used in Denmark until about 1910. The Danish American newspapers were slow to shift over from the Gothic to the Roman script. But so you can see this Gothic script. Can we go over to this corner here and down? So we've got the murder. Oh, I'm sorry, up, up in the upper right-hand corner. Over here, yes. Okay, so we have the murder in Sarajevo, and over here in national news, we have a little headline. It's the wheat harvest in Nebraska. So it's giving an overview of the harvest as it's coming in Nebraska for this particular, that there's anticipated 79,400,000 bushels of wheat to be harvested in Nebraska during that time. So then, and this is national news, down here, there was a terrorist bombing in New York City. And so that's, again, part of the national news. And it was an attack on John D. Rockefeller. So the Danish immigrant farmers and pioneers are reading about this, both national and international news. All right, let's see if we can go back to, well, let's see, what else can we see if I had, no, let's move to the next page, if we could please, Cheyenne. And we'll go back down to maybe where we can see a little bit of it. All right. Yeah, now let's see if we can enlarge it so that you can see these pages. So now we're looking at the second page of the newspaper. What do you notice?
Advertisements.
advertisements. So we begin to see advertisements, and where they are and what they advertise for is and can be interesting. But we also, if you look, I don't know if you can see what this says here. It says Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And down here, Detroit, Michigan. And if we can go lower and lower and lower, and over here, Racine, Wisconsin. What's happening? They're reporting on Danish communities around the country. Perth Amboy was very famous for creation of clay and dishware and that sort of thing. And in fact, the board of the museum met out there in Edison, where at one time, it's gone into decline, but the Archive Northeast, yeah, it was out there. So Perth Amboy, and there was a nice exhibit of the Danish community in Perth Amboy. Clinton, Iowa was famous, and I could get off on another subject. F.L. Frederick Lang Grundtvig, the youngest son of NFS Grundtvig, was the pastor there at St. Stephen's in Clinton, Iowa. So there's significant populations in these communities, and the Pioneer was reporting on that. Let's also go over to the lower, yes, over here we have another advertisement. And you see what it is? The Cunard lines. The Cunard lines. What?
The old reliable.
The old reliable Cunard line. What had happened in 1912? This is 1914. 1912, a Cunard line ship, the Titanic, sank. And we notice down here, there's sailings, regular sailings. There's the Lusitania is sailing. Within a year, that is going to be sunk by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. So it's kind of interesting to look at these pages and speculate. Okay, let's go to the next one, next page. Yes, this is fun. Okay, so here, if we can make it a little larger, well, there's so much. Okay, so we have a beer ad, okay? Guns. This is why the Danish pastors saw the Danish Pioneer as being the devil's newspaper, because there were ads for saloons, ads for beer, ads for these kinds of gatherings. But this is, so Sund's Peerless Beer, Guns, I should say, Peerless Beer. But if we bump up over here a little bit, you can maybe enlarge it. What do you think this says? Farms to sale. Farms to sale. Farms for sale. And I want to just bump up. Here's one. This is kind of interesting. This is someone in Los Angeles. They want to sell their farm up in North Dakota. Okay, let's up here a little more. Yes, I like this one. Okay, we'll let it come into focus. Here's 680 acres for sale, and it's Soren Olsen in Walnut, Iowa. And talking about it living in a Danish, you're living in a Danish community out here, so that could be attractive to a buyer of, or a reader of the Danish Pioneer as he or she is looking at it.
Would that be Kenmare?
Yes, it's up in the Kenmare area, exactly. That's exactly right. And that's where, but the person had gone out to California, so decided that it wanted to make that land available.
Of course, Minot and Bushveld.
Yes. And the Dixon house out here, that was from Kenmare North Dakota too. Yeah.
Does it say how much they were asking?
No, it does not. That's all negotiation. Well, there are some places. There's some between $300 and $400. There's a price $4,000, $2,000 down for 40 acres, which is actually quite expensive. We're thinking 1914, but prices were farm prices were going up at that time, and harvests, there was good commodity prices. So as those of us who have grown up in rural America know, that the value of land rises and falls with those commodity prices. Let's go back to the full page, if we could, this page, and up, and now drop it down to the top, and up here, and maybe enlarge it so that you can see this. Okay, can you see that? Sønderjylland. In 1914, Sønderjylland, which is a part of the Duchy of Schleswig, Sønderjylland was a part of the German Confederation, the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. And so there is news about that. In fact, this story is about there was a society, the Danske Forgangsman had died, and so it was reporting the death of the significant Dane in Sønderjylland. And now let's bring it even smaller so we can go over to the down here, the Sønderjyllands Årsmøde. Yeah, right here. So, and then, so this is all news on Sønderjylland. We have the Sønderjysk Årsmøde. There was a group of Danes living in what was then Germany, and who wanted to retain their Danishness, and so that union, they met annually, and their readers here in the United States that would be interested in that. Why? Because after the War of 1864, as some of you know, that part of what had been a part of the Danish realm went to Germany. And there was a major out-migration from Sønderjylland or Schleswig. In fact, upwards of 50,000 Danes left Schleswig and came to the United States. Interestingly enough, as you look at immigration records, they entered the United States as coming from Germany, which of course they were. But there was still this high identification with Denmark, and that's going to sow the seeds of something just yet to come. So a little bit about, then we see farms for sale, we see a focus on Sønderjylland. Let's go to page 4, if we could. Page small, or yeah, just take it down a little bit so we can see the front, the top, and there we go, boom. Okay, page 4 is where the information on the newspaper appeared, and any editorials appeared. The editorial in this issue's Danske Pioneer is entitled Den Gule Hvede, the gold wheat. It's the golden wheat harvest. It's the harvest that's coming, and so they wanted to celebrate. And of course, they're speaking to a readership that is living out in these farms, on the farms, and very much immersed in the harvest at this point. If you want to drag down, we'll look at a few things here. A little further. Okay, thanks. So these are the offices of the Danske Pioneer. It's published by Sophus F. Nebel Publishing Company, from the Nebel Building at 24th and Valley Streets in Omaha. That building still exists today. In fact, Deb, that's right, isn't it? Your doctor owns it. And I would love to get in there and just see what, but that building is still on South 24th Street, just before you cross the interstate. It's a lovely building, and up on the top it says the Nebel Building. Sophus Nebel was the publisher. He was the owner. He was the editor. Along with the staff of about 17 full-time employees at this point. What was a subscription cost for the Pioneer? A yearly subscription for the Pioneer was $2.25. 6 months, it was $1.15. You could have it sent to family in Denmark or in Schleswig, notice, for $3 and $1.50. And so that's a lot less than what we pay for the World Herald just for a month. But anyway, things have changed. That and the Pioneer and Sophus Nebel really pushed the fact that this was a newspaper available for, to be sold and to be shared in Denmark. And it was part of why it was interesting that there were reports from different communities like Perth Amboy or Clinton or Detroit, because that could be attractive to individuals or families over in Denmark thinking about, maybe I'll just sell out here and follow a dream, maybe, or follow a change. So I guess what I need to say too now, as we have Sophus Nebel and the Nebel Building there, that the newspaper, remember, was founded by Mark Hansen. Mark Hansen he was not a journalist in any way. What he did was he did surround himself with people who wrote really editorials that got people's dander up, got their emotions up. And so consequently, there would be people like Danish Lutheran pastors that would say, no, this is just not a newspaper that you should subscribe to. Why? Maybe in part because Mark Hansen was also advocating for labor. He was advocating for fair prices for labor and all. Well, he kind of ran the newspaper from afar. In 1883, a young man, he was barely 20 years of age, showed up from Falster in one of the islands in the south of Denmark. His name was Sophus Nebel, and he had been a newspaper apprentice. And he had come to the United States hoping to make enough money quickly to bring his bride over from Falster. His bride was the daughter of a dairy farmer on Falster, and he thought, well, maybe the best way to impress her father was to go to work on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, which he did. But as he wrote, he handled a pitchfork like a pen. And so he just wasn't a farmer. He wasn't a farmer at heart. And so he got word of the fact that the Pioneer existed in Omaha, and taking the last of his money, he decided to come down to Omaha. He showed up and was hired because he was a Danish newspaperman, or he was apprenticed as a newspaperman. And so, Mark Hansen hired him, and also said if he did well, he would advance him the money to bring his fiancée over. This was August of 1883. By March of 1884, he had advanced Sophus Nebel the money. Sophus was able to bring his fiancée, Christina, over. She arrived, crossed the Missouri River on the ferry. Sophus met her. They went up to the offices of the Pioneer, not the Nebo building yet, but went up to the offices of the Pioneer. Mark Hansen went down and served as a witness, and they were married at the Justice of the Peace that afternoon. And so they would not live in sin, and they took up residence. By 1887, just 3 years later, Mark Hansen, Sophus Nebo went in to ask for a raise, and Mark Hansen said, well, I'll tell you what, how about I sell you the newspaper? And he did. Sophus made an agreement and then went home and told his wife, who was not happy about that because they had just gotten out of debt. But they went back into debt, but they were very, very successful. They had 6 children, and then sadly in 1901, Christina and 3 of the children died within a week of one another because of sickness. And so that ended rather precipitously, but 3 of the children, of course, survived. Sophus did marry again, and it was not a Dane who he married, which did upset some within the Danish community. And then his wife, Olivia, survived him. And when Sophus died in 1931, she carried on the printing of the newspaper until 1958. She and 2 of the surviving sons, and Sophus's brother. So a little story on the Nebos along the side there. But I need a timer. I need someone to tell me when you get tired, just fall asleep, and then I'll know to stop. Rosa asks a good question. How often was the Pioneer published? Weekly, every Thursday. It came out every Thursday, and that's a good question. That's good knowledge to have as we go forward. And I'm going to have to go forward faster because what time is it?
It's 12:40.
Yes. Okay, maybe we won't get as much done as I thought we could. All right, let's collapse this and let's just go through a few more pages then. Well, the next page, please. Because, and this is enough, and then up in this corner, you see Denmark. This is the place for Danish news. And you can imagine how the immigrants might be responding to that. This is their opportunity to learn what was going on around the country. And we could take time, but we won't go in around there. Then let's go to, let's go to page 7, please. We still have a few pages to go. Let's go up into the corner again, up the upper left-hand corner. Yeah. So here, full page devoted to Chicago. Okay, moving right along now. Going to page, the next page, page 8. Yes. And we'll spend a little time here. Okay. So page 8. And when you go through the newspaper, you'll see certain pages are devoted to certain subjects. So page 8, Omaha, page 7, Chicago, page 6, Denmark. Here we have Omaha. And it's kind of fun to look at the Omaha page because of the advertisements, because of course the advertisements they placed on that page were from Omaha. And if we were to go over to the center there, you see where all the up. No, you're right. That's good. A little more. This is kind of good. This one's kind of interesting because this is an advertisement for the Nebraska Telephone Company. And it's advocating that, under government ownership, a good piece of work can be done, but it has often been done, but never with regard to time or economy. This is an argument for the private Nebraska Telephone Company and showing how it's more costly to have a telephone if you have a publicly owned, a national owned telephone. So it's it's advocacy for private enterprise. And let's go up to some more private enterprise from Nebraska. So this is when you look at it. So we have Washington Hall. Washington Hall is on It's actually on Leavenworth Street now, and it did exist for quite some time. There's White and Hansen's Danish Saloon on North 16th Street, the Hotel Harney, and then Andrew Ostergaard's Danish Saloon, Miller's Place, it's on 16th as well. They have fine wines, pilsners, and cigars. So the Danish Saloon down here, and the Danish Pool Hall. That's right. There was a Danish slagter too, but that may be on another. Oh, that's over here. Yes, there's a Danish bakery, a Danish butcher. You can get anything you want at Alice's or down in Omaha. So anyway, a page devoted to the bars to Omaha. Going to page 9, then, this is interesting. We're just going to go up to the upper, so the Millionaires Harbor. And if we just kind of scroll through it, you'll see that there are chapters. Chapter 15, chapter 16. So this is where fiction is serialized. And now remember, this is being published every week. So it's maybe a little bit like your soap opera, or you're going to want to know what's coming. And so that's on page 9. Let's go to page 10. This is fun too. Short stories on page 10. And we have up in the upper corner, there's the title, it's kind of The Yellow Automobile. And here, a story, a murder. And down below, there's a kvinnen, oh yes, the woman who won all their hearts. So we want to be sure that and then there's a nice little piece right here. And if you want to enlarge this is just a little filler. You know how newspapers were. They had to fill in something. It says, a woman is able to read another person's heart better than her own. I'll let you meditate on that. Okay, then that next page 11. We're almost done. Next page is another novel, another serialized novel, The Gladiators. So an action, that's probably the action novel, right? And then finally, let's go to page 12. It's a 12-page newspaper at this point. Pardon? Weekly. Yeah, weekly, sorry. Weekly 12-page with lots of text. Remember that. And this says our agricultural section. And when you read it, there is advice on farming and issues related to harvest and that. Over here, this is kind of interesting, is obituaries from the city of Copenhagen. But that's how. And then over here is eczema for hands, neck, and arms. It's medications for. So again, some of the advertisements that, and of course we have Stars and Stripes beer brewed in Omaha. So a 12-page newspaper, 8 columns, coming weekly. Why was it so successful? Why would 40,000 subscribers be reading this?
Printed in Danish.
It printed in Danish, so it was a way of hanging on to their mother tongue. It was even in a script that they probably had learned growing up, the Gothic script. Now, this is 1914. By 1921, the Danske Pioneer shifted to Roman type. And so So that made it easier to read as well. And then, well, let's think about it. So coming every week, what do you have? You have news about the United States, you have news about international news, you have news about Denmark, you have news about various communities, lots of news coming once a week.
And your serialized stories.
Serialized novels, stories. I mean, so it was providing entertainment. It was providing information, entertainment, and maybe opportunities for purchasing or moving, or if there's job opportunities or that sort of thing. So I think one can see how valuable a resource it was for the community. And that's partly what, and remember folks, this is the Danish American community. Every ethnic group had its own presses. And it's fascinating. I mean, there was a agricultural magazine published in Omaha in the Czech language. It had the largest circulation of any Czech language newspaper or medium. I mean, that's, so there was German newspapers. We can go down through. It's so much that one can learn and speculate on. I think about this as I think back. My grandfather came to the United States in 1914 as a farm laborer. Okay, so if you read stories like that and then you were out doing work, you could turn these things over in your head. Think about them. Look forward to, the next opportunity that one had to sit down with the next story. So one has an appreciation for why or how this became so important.
I have a question.
Yes.
They must have had an army of people to put this together. How did they receive all that information and put it in one paper
every week? Yes. They were getting newspapers themselves out of which they took. They were getting telegraphs, messages, but it was primarily through newspapers that they were getting. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. If we were to go to the second issue of the Pioneer that I was going to spend time in, and we won't very much, but it illustrates some things. On the second page of the Danish Pioneer of this issue from November 1908, or 2008, sorry, 2008. I wanted this, yeah, we'll go with this one. So, news about Denmark in English. Okay, this is 2008, this is 2008, right? What's happened? Shift in language. And if we were to back up, you even look at the page, there's not as much on it. There's a lot, the ads take up as much space as the stories do. Let's go back to the first page though. There's a reason I picked this issue. Because I'm on the front page, that's it. No, it was up. It's, yeah, you can't read. No, we were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the museum. And if you scroll way, down to the bottom of the page, let's get Terry's picture there. Because the Danish Museum named Tourism Attraction of the Year. Come. Let's get there's Terry receiving the. But notice this is the front page, and what do you notice about it?
Museum.
It's all. In this case, it's almost all museum. Headlines. They're headlines. These are some of the differences, right? There's more white space. I mean, it's just. Why? Well, maybe there's not as many readers either. It's appealing to a smaller community. Well, it's appropriate to come to this last one because the fact that the Danish Pioneer is still being published, we owe a great deal to the Stephenson family, Chris and Elsa Stephenson. As I mentioned earlier, in 1958, the Danish Pioneer ceased publication in Omaha. It was purchased by a Hjalmar Bertelsen, who had a printing press and printing company in Elmwood Park, Illinois. And he continued to offer the Danish Pioneer. He didn't want to see it die. There were investors in the Chicago community that were willing to invest in it, and so they were able to bring the Pioneer out there. Hjalmar Bertelsen is a very interesting person in his own right. He grew up in Vendsyssel, up in the northern part of Denmark. He had trained as a typographer, so he was in the print business. He liked to say that he actually sold programs at the first Raybould Festival in Denmark in 1912. That was when the Raybould National Park Society was founded. And so he had this long association with Raybould as well. And so he wanted to carry on the newspaper. He did until his death in late 1981. It was December of 1981, and it was then that Chris and Elsa Stephenson bought the newspaper and continued its publication, and has continued its publication. And I will pass around, we just got our most recent copy of the Pioneer. I'll pass it around, and you can look at it, and you can see how there are differences between this issue of 1914 that we saw and how it is today. Rosalie? This issue was November 2008. November 3rd through 10th, 2008. Yeah.
Did each newspaper, when they were doing the early papers, like in Omaha with the different communities,
Yes.
did they each have their own printing press?
Yes.
Oh.
Oftentimes, yes. Because those communities, and this is part of, it's part of the wonderful aspect, I think, of America, is the assimilation occurs, but in the whole immigrant process, the communities, as immigrant groups came to this country, tended to collect together, witnessed the settlement around Elkhorn, and tended to preserve elements of that identity. Same is true in the cities. They tended to, and then slowly those areas changed. It's interesting, if we were to go back to the ads on the Danish community in Omaha, many of them are on North 16th Street. And that area was a part of the Scandinavian area. It's why the North High School Vikings are the North High School Vikings in Omaha. It was Scandinavians and it was Germans. But as the city grew, those people tended to sell out and move west, and then we have a rise of the African American community in Omaha. So you have these different, changes in the communities. But each of those communities oftentimes had their own businesses, as in the case, as you asked about with newspapers or printing, they had their own printing presses. It was one way to connect that community together. And I think that's what Elsa and Linda Stephenson feel about the newspaper, is that it has helped to keep the community together. Now they recognize that with the advent of social media, that the Pioneers may have made it 150 years as in the print medium, but may have to go to all electronic. And that may be just a recognition of the changes in technology that come. Yes?
Now, or the one before, what was the paper?
It was called the Nebraska Scandinavian.
Okay,
Nebraska Scandinavian.
Okay, did it just do Danish?
Yes. It was Dano-Norwegian. And there was also Swedish in it as well. There was a larger Swedish community to the west, in the Wahoo area and on west. But yeah, they had probably a larger vision in appealing to a larger population. But that may have been why the Pioneer was successful, because it was just focusing on the Danish, and so then the Danish immigrants were more likely to.
So did the Scandinavian have the 3 different languages in it, or just Danish?
Well, at that time, in 1872, Danish and Norwegian were the same.
Oh.
Yeah. it's only after Norwegian independence, and Tove can tell you about that, Nynorsk comes into use. Swedish, yes, that had to be separate because, but many people could read both. I mean, there was a fair degree of mutual understanding. Deb.
In the early days of the Danish Pioneer, massive information, and knowing the time of communication, how it got their news. How old was that news when it got to my house?
Well, you know, that's a good question, but I think we can say, looking at that 1914 issue, that was July 9th or 10th, I think, or 9th it was, July 9th, 1914. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand was June 25th, I think, so it was, you know, that was within about 2 weeks. And of course, the individuals writing the newspaper also read. It wasn't just Danish newspapers they were reading. They were literate. They could read American newspapers too. So they were pulling their news from other newspapers as well. And then it went on, they printed on Thursday, it went to the post office by Friday morning, and then it got sent out from there. So,
June 28th.
June 28th is when, oh, that's good, that's even closer. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated on June 28th, so the 28th to the 9th is that's not that long. That's moving rather quickly. Sometimes we think, you know, that it was, that one was maybe so distant that it would take so long to get there, but no, by that time it was moving along rather quickly, so yeah. So, let's see, where are we? It's about 1 o'clock. It's probably 1:15. Okay. What I think we have to acknowledge is that this newspaper, Den Danske Pioneer, has continued because of the people who have made it their mission almost to preserve a newspaper that serves as a communication to a community. And I feel that every time I speak with Linda Stephenson and with Elsa Stephenson. Elsa is now in her early 90s, and she said, yes, my daughters have taken over the operation of the paper. Linda edits it. Elizabeth is the bookkeeper. She said, but they allow me to do the second page, and that is news from Denmark. And they allow me to do the last page, which, if you follow the newspaper, has jokes on it, both in Danish and in English. And I'll let you read those and judge the quality of those jokes. But it's been such an important vehicle, and certainly that they would have spotlighted the museum. We at the museum think it's been very important as well. Chris was on the board of the museum in the early years, and it was just so important to have those individuals to help us get the news of the creation and building of the museum here. So, Den Danske Pioneer, 150 years old. Ha, ha, ha. Thank you.